That's to Sherry Zeller to take us throughout the remainder of the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, good morning, TDD Steering Committee members. Glad to be with you all today and hope you are all staying safe during these trying times. We have a PowerPoint, so I believe it's up. And if we can go to the next slide, which is probably the agenda. Whoever's controlling the PowerPoint.
That would be David Reynolds.
Okay, great. Okay, so first off, we wanted to start with the update on the progress of the rail projects and then just provide you with an update. And then the main topic would be, and I can go through all this a little bit later because we have slides for each of these, but TIF versus the TDD, kind of the big picture there, and then the implementation of the TDDs, and then kind of, you know, how does it work when the TIF and the TDDs overlap? It's a very common question that we get. And then we have our 2021 schedule that we wanted to present to you all today. So David, if you can go to the next slide, it should be our rail project. So I guess one bright spot in all that's going on this year is our rail projects are actually progressing quite nicely. Both Double Track and Westlake are floating through the federal process. And as you know, the specifics for each are on each slide respectively. But just as a matter of an update for Westlake on, I'm sure you've heard, on October 28th, the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, they signed the grant providing the funding to make the Westlake Corridor project a reality. So it's very exciting that is moving forward. So the Northwest Indiana Commuter Transportation District, NICD, the rail operator, they're already working with its design and construction teams to begin the 4+ years of work to make the Westlake line operational. That is the update on Westlake. So I think if we could just jump to Double Track. Okay, so Double Track, they've received permission to enter into engineering. I believe this was probably the same update as last time, but just as a reminder, they received that from the FTA. So NICD will complete all design and engineering as part of the cost, and it will be reimbursed by the FTA. And to get Double Track to the part where Westlake is the full funding grant agreement, they have a goal of reaching that by January 20th, 2021. So those are the rail updates. If you have any questions, we can definitely answer that. If not, I think we can move. Okay. And hopefully you can hear me. My computer is saying my internet connection is a little unstable. So if I'm in and out, if somebody can just alert me to that, that would be great. But just in terms of a TDD project update, some developments there. As you know, during the past 2 years, RDA has been meeting with the station area community leaders, you know, to understand their visions and planning concepts for TOD. So tonight is our first of many virtual meetings for public engagement, and the focus station will be the Ridge Road station in Munster. So the RDA will be joined by Dustin Anderson, town manager of Munster, along with our planning team. And it's to move forward with the next step in the process to discuss the specifics of the development around the Ridge Road station. So we're going to begin introducing that to the public tonight. It's at 6 p.m. Dave Wallman has sent out a Zoom invite. If you haven't received it and you would like to participate, we hope that you can tune in for a little bit of it. I think it'll be an hour and a half, so it'd be nice to have you with us. So if you need that link, make sure that you contact us with Dave Wallman, and he can get you all set up with that. And then in terms of the other ones that are scheduled for the virtual meetings, we do have the Munster Dyer Main Street station scheduled for December 2nd and Ogden Dunes for December 3rd. And again, all virtual at this point. And then kind of the last part of this slide where we're at with our other communities, the boundary study areas have been presented to most of our other communities. So they'll be well on their way to the public engagement stuff like we're working on with Munster Dyer and Ogden Dunes. And we do have a project website, and if you could check it out, we would definitely appreciate it. We've put some work into that. It's nwitdd.com, and that's where you'll find all the project information, any upcoming meetings that we have. So that is the project update. If there's any questions, please let me know. Okay. And now we're going to just jump right into the main topic here, the TDD big picture. I'm going to hand this over to a team member in a second, but this slide is just an overview of what TDDs are in statute, which you all know, but it's a reminder to have this. And then we'll talk about the boundary parameters, and then we'll jump into the main topic. And we get this question a lot, and it's, what if the proposed TDD falls within an existing TIF? It's a great question. We've had many individual community discussions about this very topic, but we wanted to dive a little bit deeper, do kind of a 101, and then dive deeper into the conversation with you all today, and of course answer any questions that you might have with us. So with that, I'll ask David Reynolds from Policy Analytics if he could take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Sherry. I'm joined today with Bill Sheldrick of Policy Analytics and Jason O'Neill of Policy Analytics. So we're all socially distancing within our conference room with one feed on the video. So as we talk, you may see my face, but you may hear Bill or Jason talking. So at some point I may turn off my video just so it's less confusing. As we go through this, I'm happy to take your questions. For the flow of the presentation, though, perhaps we could hold those until the end if that works for everybody, and we can kind of take the questions as at the end of the presentation if that works for everybody. So as Sherry was saying,
I jump in with one quick note. Sorry about this, just a technical note for anyone in the audience watching this presentation who can't speak directly. You can use the chat function and put your questions in there, and then once Dave gets through his presentation, we'll go ahead and go through any questions there, as well as any questions that our committee members have. That's all. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt, Dave.
No, happy. Thanks, David. Appreciate it. As Sherry was mentioning, what we're wanting to do today is kind of walk through the TDDs and specifically the TIF and how the interaction between the TDDs and the TIF is going to play out. And we've spent some time thinking through that, and so we wanted to communicate that with the steering committee and start addressing some of the questions that are out there in the public domain right now on that. So without further ado, we'll jump right into it. As we've talked about with this steering committee previously, transit development districts, kind of the big picture, they were established in 2017 by the Indiana General Assembly. And they were essentially established to facilitate investment and redevelopment around the transit station areas. And within the transit development districts, it'll capture the incremental local property taxes and local income taxes. And those incremental dollars, revenues, will be distributed to the RDA for the TDDs that are located within Lake and Porter counties. And then those incremental revenues that are collected in LaPorte and St. Joseph County would go to the local redevelopment commission in LaPorte and St. Joe counties. The TDDs then will be established by resolution of the RDA board after 2 public hearings. And then ultimately, those TDD boundaries will be taken to the State Budget Committee, where they will be reviewed by the State Budget Committee for approval for final actions. And then the statute sets up that the districts themselves expire no later than 2047 under current legislation. Now, the RDA is in discussions and considering seeking a change to that legislation to allow some more flexibility as far as if there's any debt that goes beyond 2047, but there's not a final decision there. So there may be a change to that specific piece of the statute. All right, my screen was kind of slow to catch up, so here we go. So as you recall, we've talked about this before. A TDD is a district around the train station. It's limited to a half square mile area that must include the station and the parking. And it's limited to 320 acres in the first iterations, which is equal to a half square mile, and then maybe expanded one time to 640 acres, which would then be a mile square. The TDDs can be irregular in shape, and so they don't have to be a circle. And so that's essentially what this graphic is attempting to illustrate, is that the district may not be a perfect circle. It could be irregular in shape. And as I said before, it has to include the station and the parking areas. And then everyone, I'm sure, on the call is familiar with what a TIF, tax increment financing district, is. But just to make sure everyone's on the same page, the TIF legislation was established in the 80s. They're created by the local redevelopment commission with the same objective, if you will, is to facilitate redevelopment, economic development in the areas. And then the incremental revenues of the TIF go to the redevelopment commission. And then they're created by resolution of the RDC, and the fiscal body has to make a confirmation of those resolutions. And then the TIFs collect the increment revenue, property tax revenues of real property, and in some cases, depreciable personal property. So as the RDA moves forward in implementing the TDD legislation, it has a planning team that has been before your group before. The planning team consists of policy analytics, KPMG, and MKSK. And that planning team with the RDA has been working with communities that have been surrounding the stations of both the Westlake and the Southlake track lines for the last couple of years, as Sherry talked about. The RDA is meeting with representatives from each community, trying to find consensus around the boundaries, and then using the vision that the community has for their area to identify and help them think through the boundaries, meeting all the planning and the visions that the community has. So the RDA planning team's evaluating the economic and fiscal potential for development around and within each TDD boundary. And then, as Sherry mentioned, we have began the process of convening the public engagement sessions. And we have, as Sherry mentioned, we have Munster Ridge Road this evening. And then we're all working towards the RDA board holding the 2 public meetings to establish the TD boundaries. And then upon that passage by the RDA board would go then to the state budget committee. And this is likely to occur sometime in mid-2021. So at this point, I'm going to pass it off to Bill Sheldrick with Policy Analytics to take us beyond.
Thanks, Dave. So one of the big questions that many of the communities have as we talk with them about a TDD, because the areas that these communities are interested in seeing developed, in many cases have already been included in an established TIF district that community has, over the past years, has, through their redevelopment commission, established the boundary of. So it doesn't always happen, but in many cases, the primary areas that a TDD can impact are areas, in addition to around the station, are areas where a TIF district is already in place. The law, the statute was passed in 2017, actually anticipates this. And what we're going to do in the next few slides is talk about how that would work out, and how communities, for instance, debt service on bond issues that are already outstanding as part of the TIF district, how those can be protected. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next few slides. And we just, I know this is going to get complicated. There will be time for questions at the end, and frankly, if we need to, we'll skip back to slides or graphics in order to cover those questions. So the first thing that, and the law anticipates this, is second bullet here on this page, is that the municipality and the RDA will negotiate on the distribution of the incremental property taxes within the area of overlap. Again, there's going to be a graphic to talk about this in a page or two here. I think the thing that we want to emphasize here is that the establishing of a TDD cannot impair the debt service commitments that a municipality has. So there's no question that a TDD overlapping a TIF district, the TDD cannot take the debt service revenues or the incremental revenues from the TIF district and take them away from debt service. That just won't happen. And so that's the first thing that we need to emphasize, and that is that the TIF is the TIF bond obligations are protected. And remember, in all of this, the RDA has no interest in establishing a TDD boundary where the community really doesn't want it. So this entire situation of establishing the boundaries and working through which parcels are included and which parcels aren't, all of this is a consensus discussion, and so that's kind of the overarching thought about all of this. Within the law, the fourth bullet here, how the allocation of the incremental revenues, property tax revenues between the TDD and the TIF district, that will be set out specifically within a memorandum of understanding. Just to be clear about this, nobody can issue debt without having a clear allocation of these revenues, and so there will be a stated written MOA signed by the community and signed by the RDA that shows how these revenues will be allocated in order to preserve the ability, first of all, of the TIF district to continue its debt service obligations, and secondly, so that the RDA can issue debt based on the incremental revenues from the TDD. So that MOA will include a number of issues with regard to how the revenues are allocated, and also as to the timing of that. So, and we'll get into timing issues here in another couple of slides. this may be too deep in the weeds, but on the next to the last bullet, what will happen is that in the areas where the TDD overlaps the TIF, the county auditor will, by necessity, create what's called a separate special district, just in order to make sure that the property tax increment from that overlapped area is separately accounted for. So just so you know, there will be no question about how those incremental revenues are set out. And then the local income tax revenues will be distributed to the from the RDA, distributed to the RDA from the district in which they're derived. And that is one of the things about a TDD that provides a benefit, and that is that in addition to incremental property taxes, there will be incremental revenue, income tax revenue, that are collected. And so that is an additional stream of revenue, provides for additional possibly debt service or for capital investment. Why don't we go to the next slide? So this is one of those graphics that, frankly, probably only a mother could love. This is a pretty complicated graphic, but what we're trying to demonstrate here is that, as we talked about, in the case of a TIF and TDD overlapping, the existing TIF boundary in blue is designated A. The red, orange, whatever, salmon-colored area is the TDD boundary, and where they overlap is C. And so, as I said earlier, the county auditor will establish these districts, A, B, and C. A will already have been established, and the TIF increment will go to A and C. And as I said, per the MOA, a portion of the overlapped revenue C will be distributed to the RDA. And in that case, for instance, if the community wants to see some development within overlap C, and it's new development that is essentially created by the TDD in the station area, the community may say, we want the RDA to issue bonds here. Or the community may say, we want to issue additional TIF bonds, and the MOA, again, will identify those revenues and those parcels from which those revenues come so that they can be pledged to the TIF district's new bonds. And then in the non-overlapped area, the incremental property taxes and the incremental income taxes will be distributed to the RDA only for use within that district. So there's some flexibility here. We can talk about that in some of the next slides. But for instance, if a community wanted to utilize some of the additional incremental revenues that came from TDD boundary B within overlapped area C, the community and the RDA could agree to that and specify that within the MOA, which might in fact encourage or increase the ability to issue debt on a specific project within area C. And as I said, all of the local income taxes within the TDD boundary, both B and C, are distributed to the TDD and to the RDA. So let's go to the next slide. So as we've just talked about, the TDD under current law expires 6/30/2047. In some cases, if a TIF district is expiring prior to that point in time, and most of them will, if there is an overlapped area, it may be the case that the TDD can extend the life of a TIF district by essentially picking up where the TIF district left off and continue the development work and the financing opportunities within that development area. Again, as I talked about in the last slide, a TDD may be able to provide additional capital to fund development, and certainly a TDD will provide additional capital in the sense that if a TDD boundary extends beyond where a TIF is, then for that community, there's additional capital and additional development opportunities that exist. And that's the third bullet there. And then a TDD can give flexibility, as I talked about, if in the MOA, if the community and the RDA are interested in sharing those revenues back and forth, either over time or because of a particular projects located in one area or the other, the TDD can provide some flexibility for the community. And again, remembering that the RDA, even though the RDA does get the incremental property and income taxes within the TDD, the revenues are used only within the TDD and allow the municipality to specify where they see those development projects needing to take place. And then finally, the TDD can provide access to innovative funding and financing solutions. Within the RDA's team, there are funding experts, project finance experts that can assist. So it is anticipated that after the TDD is established, there will continue to be work done by the RDA team and the local community to try to assist and collaboratively move projects forward within those development areas around the station. I think I probably need to apologize for this graphic in advance. This is pretty darn deep in the weeds, but this is attempting to show how if you have an overlap between a TDD and a TIF district, how it works. And I'm gonna also open up to my colleague across the table here, Mr. Reynolds, but I'll get started on this slide. First of all, those of you who know and understand the TIF district and the basic theoretical construct of a TIF district, you have a base revenues. So the base of a TIF district is established in a certain year. Property taxes in that year of base year are continue to go to the local schools and city and townships and libraries and so on. So those taxes continue to flow there. And then within the TIF district, to the extent that there are increases in those property taxes, that becomes the TIF increment, and that revenue flows to the redevelopment commission in the case of TIFs established. And the redevelopment commission then uses those TIF incremental revenues for project specific, and there are a number of uses that are allowable under the statute, and essentially the same, we didn't talk about this, the same allowable uses for TIF increment are the allowable uses for a TDD increment as well. Then a TDD is established in a particular year. The base year of a TDD, it again has a base year. The base year of a TDD is the year which the state budget committee approves the resolution for the boundary. So again, you have a base year, and in this case, you can see there's a vertical line there showing that a TDD is created. And one of the things that we might want to talk about is to what extent should there be delays? So there's flexibility here. Should there be delays in the base year, the creation of these TDDs? And again, maybe not, but that's a question. Then if you look at the graphic, the light blue with the arrow designates that overlapping revenues where the, as we go back, if you went back a slide, you see the C area, the overlapping revenues get allocated per the negotiated MOA. In most cases, those property tax increment from the overlapping areas will be allocated to the TIF district. But again, that has to be specified within the MOA. And then you can see the orange area there, the incremental income tax begins to be collected. And in this case, what we're talking about here is if a TIF expires prior to the TDD, then you have the ability of the TDD to continue. The parcels within the TIF increment go back to the base. The TDD property tax area continues, and the TDD income tax continues, allowing for, in some cases, if you issued new bonds, to allow those new bonds to go on and to provide capital for investment and development projects after the life of the TIF district has expired. So I'm going to stop there, and there's going to be a question slide in just a few minutes. I wonder if we can just go to the conclusion slide, which is slide 14, the next slide. Let's deal with the big picture conclusions from this, and then we're going to open it up, and I'm going to turn it back to my colleague for us to deal with questions. And again, I apologize that this whole subject is pretty deep in the weeds, but so our primary conclusions here are that that a TDD is being implemented in a collaborative way, consensual way between the RDA and the local communities. That's what we're working on doing, as Sherry said at the beginning of this presentation, and the TDDs are established for exactly the same reason that a community establishes TIF districts, and that is to capitalize on the possibilities and efforts towards increased development and redevelopment, and to allow the revenues that are derived from that redevelopment to help to fund the development efforts and the projects that are anticipated within that district. The third point, and I can't emphasize this too much, a negotiated MOA between the RDA and the community is where the real secret sauce lies in terms of the allocation of the revenues and ensuring the protection of the debt service levies for outstanding bonds that have already been issued by the TIF district. So that MOA will be an extremely important part of the work between the RDA and the municipality. And then finally, number 4, TDDs do provide additional financing options, flexibility between for a community where you're looking at the redevelopment area and you're trying to see how to extend the life of the redevelopment capital financing provisions and tools. And so the TDDs are intended to assist the community, not to take over, but to assist and complement the municipality's efforts to redevelop areas within the municipality's boundaries. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to my colleague. And I just want everybody to know that we're entirely understanding. If you want to jump back to a slide or two, feel free to do so, and we'll try to deal with questions here as you have them.
All right, thank you, Bill. Are there any questions from the steering committee or Dave Wellman? Did you get any requested questions or?
No, I did not, David.
David, this is Tim Corcoran from the City of South Bend. I do have a question, maybe on slide 13 might be the best point to discuss. What I was curious about is the portion between the when a TDD is created and the TIF expires in that overlap area. Where does essentially that sort of sliver of orange above the light blue, is that essentially like the percentage that is negotiated in the MOA? Is that kind of what that represents in a way?
No, the sliver of the orange, Tim, is the local income tax that is being captured in the TDD, and it's not part of the, as you know, the TIF doesn't collect local income tax. So that piece would come back, and in St. Joe County, that would go back to the RDC.
Okay, so the MOA would look at the distribution of those funds in the light blue area. And
correct. The MOA would be essentially focused on the local property taxes. Yeah. And the incremental local property taxes that are captured by both the TIF and the TDD.
Yeah, and the second question I guess I have is that is there like in that MOU agreement, is there a need for some sort of minimum allocation?
I'm getting some echo, Tim, so I'm having trouble understanding you.
Yes, yeah, I heard that too. In the MOA, is there a minimum amount of that allocation that would be needed for the TDD? So as long as like debt service in that TIF is covered, I'm just trying to think like what is required or what is preferable, or I don't know what the right word is, but of the shared portion, and if there is some sort of minimum that is needed.
I think the only, as I think about it, I open it up to Bill or others, but as I think about this, the minimum is, the only minimum that would be around here would be to make sure that any sort of debt that is obligated against that incremental is covered. And so from the standpoint of a TIF, first and foremost, the MOU would want to make sure that the debt associated with the underlying TIF was covered. The MOA would be established prior to the TDD having any sort of TIF. And so that, that wouldn't really come into play when you're initially negotiating the MOA. Bill, do you have other thoughts on that? Or, I mean, I don't see any minimums.
I agree. I don't see any minimums either. I think that the entire issue is, as David said, is how do you protect any outstanding debt obligations? And those outstanding debt obligations, when you're establishing the MOA, when you're establishing the TDD district in the first place, the TDD is not going to have any outstanding debt obligations. So really, any minimums will be on behalf of the TIF district, not the TDD. So no, I don't see any reason why there would be a minimum. I just can't conceive of anything that would cause there to be a minimum for the TDD district.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Brian. I have kind of like two subjects. First of all, I'd like to thank whoever the author of slide 13 is. That is a very excellent slide and helps me understand it. And I was hoping if that could be sent separately in a PDF so that I could share that with others. The second point, when it comes to income, are you talking about personal and business income? How is that increment defined? Is it the people who live in the boundaries or the people who work in the boundaries? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure, Brian. The TDD would capture local income taxes. Okay, so it's individual income taxes of individuals that reside and work within the district. And so and how it's captured, it's the RDA would be required to work with the businesses within the district to get that information reported to the Department of Revenue, who would then calculate that base and the increment, and then would do the distribution through the state budget agency.
So in some respects, it's the income caused by the new job created in the area, but there's a base of what that person earned before that time that wouldn't be captured?
Well, what the Department of Revenue would do is they would establish a base of the income for that district when it was established. And then any additional increment above that base is what's captured. Are there any other questions? Or Brian, did that, I guess maybe I should say, Brian, did that answer your question?
Sorry, I put myself on mute, so but yeah, it helps me enough. I think that might be something more I'd have to talk to our finance person to understand it in greater detail, but concept-wise, I think I follow.
Okay, and then yes, we can certainly send this graphic out separately. I'm assuming the entire presentation is sent to the steering committee as well, but we could certainly send this graphic out separately. And thank you for mentioning that it's a good graphic. We appreciate that. Took a lot of time to work through it.
David, we have a few questions piling up here in the chat room. If you're ready.
Sure.
Okay, our first question is: at what point in the process will the memorandums of understanding be negotiated?
Well, I think it would be an ongoing process as you know, as the RDA continues to work with the communities and we start finalizing the districts and we start doing some of the simulations, if you will, of what potentially the TDD would capture based on, you know, the plans and the possible land use and possible development that's going to occur. I think that that point is when the RDA would have these ongoing discussions with the communities. So I think it's just a continuation of what's going on right now as far as how the MOU would be negotiated and determined. I mean, Bill, do you have
No, I think that's,
thoughts?
no, I think that's right. I'd agree with that. I think certainly by the time the boundary is approved by the RDA board in resolution and taken to the state budget committee, the RDA and the community would want to have a pretty good understanding of how the revenues will be allocated. I think in the due diligence that we have done so far with the RDA team, we have a pretty good idea of what the TIF district revenues are and outstanding obligations there too. However, as we get further along in discussing the boundaries with the communities, we will want to get very specific about both what the community wants to protect or believes they need to protect in terms of debt service, and also just what their projects are. In some cases, communities have projects that aren't inked yet, but are coming along. So as David said, it's going to be a developing, evolving kind of discussion. But again, by the time the boundary is, I don't think it has to be, but by the time the boundary is set in stone in terms of the discussions with the state, we certainly should have a pretty good idea of what the MOA is going to look like.
Okay. All right. Next question here is about the TDD can extend the life of the TIF district. Now, is that the entire district or just the area of overlap? And also, can you define local income tax for the group?
Sorry, I went the wrong way on my, I was trying to go back to the concept there is that just as in this graphic, a TIF has a date certain of when it's going to expire. And to the extent that the TDD would overlap that TIF, that would then potentially, or does, extend the capture of increment that's occurring, redevelopment that's occurring within that overlap district. And then that would extend the life, if you will, of that increment to be used back into the district for that redevelopment and the economic development. You can notice in the graph here that what happens when the TIF expires is that original TIF increment that existed when the TDD was created, that all goes back to the base. So that's that green, that's that increase in the base there that you see where on the graphic where the TIF expires, those TIF increment dollars would go back to the base. And then what's continued is this incremental growth of the TDD beyond that point. On the TDD income tax, as I mentioned in Brian's question, the local income that is captured is the individual income tax for dollars that are earned in the district, which represents both people that reside in the district and people that work in the district.
Okay. Our next question is addressed to Sherry Ziller. Sherry, the question is, when will the required TDD public meetings happen for all the communities that are involved in the Westlake project? I'm assuming they will be Zoom meetings only at this point.
Okay, thank you for that question. Thank you, Dave, for reading it. So it's really a three-step process. So first step is the public engagement portion, which is what we're doing tonight with Munster. So that will be the first time we introduce concepts and development scenarios to the public and receive their feedback. And then after we do that, there is a second and third step, which involves the governance process of the RDA board. So they would need to hold, our board would need to hold the public hearing, which is a more formal way, and it's in statute, to receive public comment that way. It's a little bit more formal than what tonight will be. And then the RDA board would hold a public meeting, which is very much like their board meeting. In fact, it can be conducted at our next board meeting if we were ready to do so. So we do have a schedule. We didn't necessarily lump the Westlake communities with the others. It was a matter of which ones gave us the information that we had and the ones that we analyzed first. So Munster, Dyer, and Ogden Dunes, I would say, are in tier 1. So I'm not sure what exact community, I don't know if David, if you mentioned what community that we were talking about, but if you say the Westlake ones, so Hammond would be the next one, I suppose. That's on track. We've met with Hammond, as you know, Brian, not directing that necessarily at you, but we've met with you multiple times about the Gateway Station, and we'll meet with you about the South Hammond Station here pretty soon. So really the next step with the Gateway Station for Hammond specifically is the public engagement process like we're doing tonight with Munster. So I encourage you to tune in so you can kind of get a glimpse of how that process would look, and then we could start planning that for your community and for all the communities. I hope that answered the question.
Okay.
And yes, they will be virtual. They will, yeah, until further notice, and especially with the gathering limitations keep going down. Yeah, I mean, we'd like to keep everyone safe, and we feel that we can accomplish a heck of a lot doing it in a virtual format.
Excellent. All right, our next question is speaking to Michigan City, and I suppose it would probably apply to South Bend as well. Would we execute the MOA with ourselves to establish the pass-through funds, or still execute with the RDA for areas overlapping the TIF?
This is Bill Sheldrick. I'll try to answer this, and if I'm answering the wrong question, please tell me when I get done here. So the revenues, as we said, the revenues for the districts within LaPorte and St. Joe counties do go to the redevelopment commissions. So like a regular TIF district, you as the redevelopment commission will have the responsibility of deciding how much pass-through, in other words, revenues that for the rest of the folks, how much revenue goes to the base units of government, rather than being captured by the redevelopment commission. That allocation will really be done by the redevelopment commission in the way you would do that for a TIF district. So if that answers your question, I think there's some maybe a little greater flexibility or ambiguity here with regard to what role does the RDA play, if any, after the boundary has been established in working with the municipalities in St. Joe and LaPorte counties. there may be a case in which there is an MOA between the RDA and those units to for the RDA to assist. But again, pretty much in those two counties, the redevelopment commission is essentially in charge of all the functions. Did I answer your question?
Sounds good to me. If there's a follow-up, obviously just pop that in chat, and I will ask that as well. And finally, here we have a follow-up to our first question about when the memorandums would be negotiated. And a follow-up to that question is asking, so will there be many MOAs per TDD or just one?
This is Bill Sheldrake again. Actually, we have thought of that. I think that the MOA process will be an iterative process. As development projects, this is going to be a living/working relationship between the RDA and the local community. And for those of you who are involved in development, you know that circumstances change and new projects come along that look good, and some of the older projects don't pan out. So I do think there will be amendments to the MOA. My guess is that the MOAs will be structured in such a way that amendments can take place, but certain things will be stated that can't be changed. For instance, limitations on or protections for the incremental revenues necessary for debt service, such that bonds that are already outstanding can be assured, and that any new bonds that are issued, particularly if they're issued by the RDA within the TDD, that those revenues can be assured. I think that those kinds of allocation decisions will largely be set in stone, but there will be, I think, as additional revenues become available, there will be the ability to make amendments to the MOAs in such a way that that the financing of projects can move and be flexible over time. So yes, I think there will be additional MOAs, or at least amendments to the MOA, and they will both protect outstanding bonds and provide flexibility. Hope that answers the question.
And that's all of our questions in chat. So back over to our panel.
Okay, I'll jump in. Thanks, Dave. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. We know that this is a complicated and challenging topic, so thank you for your participation, and we hope that we were able to answer a few questions that you all had. So I think just in terms of next steps, we'll continue working with the TDD communities on the public engagement process, and we'll work specifically with South Bend too to get them caught up in the process. So we already had our initial kind of meet and greet with our new member, which went very well, so thank you for your time. And then also remember the virtual meeting tonight for Munster, 6 p.m. So we do hope that you check it out. And then lastly, this slide is, as you know, we meet quarterly. For now, if we need to meet on a more regular basis, we can work that out. But for now, these are the dates. And then perhaps Mr. Wellman can send out the Zoom invite. That always helps us out, so we're able to participate. So location is going to be virtual until further notice. And I think that's it. So Mr. Chair, I will hand it back to you.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions? If not, I'd like to wish everyone a very safe, prosperous, and a happy holiday season, and a great new year.
Same to you all as well. Thank you. Have a
Thank you.
great day.
Bye now.
Thanks. All right. Everybody have a
Thank
great
you.
day.